The most important thing to understand in EVE Echo's combat is how to set up the defense of your ship. But understanding defense can be more complicated than you might think, so in this video I am going to tell you everything you need to know. The first thing you need to know about defense is a term called EHP, which stands for effective hit points and is also often referred to as just defense. If you click on these three dots and then on attribute fittings, you will see a breakdown showing that your EHP is just a calculation of all of your hit points multiplied by your lowest resistance for that category. This breakdown is the key to understanding defense in this game, and you will want to go back here and check this often to make sure you are building your ship correctly. But this number can also often be misleading for three reasons. The first reason is because functionally most of your EHP doesn't even matter. For example, this Phantasm, which favors shield tanking, has a base 6,666 hit points with its lowest resistance of 0%, making the shield contribution to its EHP only 6,666, while its structure's contribution to its EHP totals at 7,448. So while it's nice to have that structure buffering before dying, functionally you may never use those hit points ever. Meanwhile, those 6,000 hit points are being used over and over and over again. The second reason is because EHP does not factor in what type of damage you are taking. You will notice that while the Phantasm shields have no natural resistance to EM damage, they have a natural 50% resistance towards explosive damage, meaning that those same hit points would be twice as effective in a fight against that damage type. And since many times you only need to have high resistances in certain damage types, your EHP will not reflect your ship's true strength. On that note, you will notice that adding resistances to your ship have a diminishing return. This is because all resistances are applied to damage separately. So for a simplified example, if your resistance was at 0 and you added something that gave 50% resistance, you would get 50% resistance. Then if you added another 50% resistance to that same damage type, you would only increase your resistance by 25% because it is only reducing the 50% that you had left. And then if you added another 50% resistance to the same damage type, you would only add 12.5%, and so on and so forth. This is of course an unrealistic example because nothing in the game gives you 50% resistance consistently, so here is an example of something you might find in the game. And then lastly, the third reason is because EHP does not include healing, which if the battle goes long enough can account for over 10 times as many hit points as your entire EHP ranking. So that is an overview of your defense, and now let's go over every defensive item in the game and how to use them to manipulate the stats of your ship to maximize its effectiveness. The first thing you need to decide is whether or not you are going to be building your ship to be a shield tank or an armor tank. Most ships have a natural leaning, which you can see by looking at which resistance are listed here. But again, if you press on these three dots and then attribute fitting, you will notice that almost all ships have the same resistances for shields, armor, and structures. So in many cases, it is not a problem to build a ship outside of its original design. And in some cases, when you're working with a corporation or logistic ships, it is actually much better to build it outside of its original design. As a general rule, ships that are shield tanked are more nimble and perform better the shorter the fight is, whereas ships that are armor tanked are usually slower but take less damage and have better sustainability. This is because of several factors. The first factor is that regardless of faction, armor has around 20% more natural resistance than shields. 20% might not seem like a whole lot when split up between the 4 different damage types, but you have to keep in mind that with resistances, that average of 5% is applied to all damage taken, so it also increases the effectiveness of your healing. Another factor to keep in mind is that if you take an average of the 4 factions and all of the other smaller factions, ships generally have 3% more armor than they have shields. This is a much smaller and almost pointless number, but it does go to show that armor is a little bit more abundant in the game than shields are. But one of the biggest differences that you need to keep in mind when considering whether or not to build your ship as a shield or armor tank is the effect that modules will have on them. The first type of module to consider is shield boosters and armor reps. These modules use capacitor to restore hit points, and they are crucial for long-term sustainability, which makes them particularly important for ratting. If you do not understand ratting very well, make sure to check out my tips and tricks video for this game. Armor repairs require twice as much power grid than shield boosters, which limits some options, but boosting shields requires 50% more capacitor than repairing armor, making it much easier for armor tanks to run multiple repair modules on tanky ships. The second type of module to consider are shield extenders and armor plates. These modules add a huge amount of hit points passively and allow you to activate them for the same amount of temporary hit points, substantially increasing how tanky your ship is. These modules are great for lots of situations, but they are particularly helpful in PvP because it would take a comparable booster or repair around 30 seconds to heal the amount of hit points gotten passively, and around another 30 seconds to cover the hit points gained temporarily. Shield extenders require 25% less power grid than armor plates, but they increase your signature radius, making you easier to hit. Whereas armor plates provide 13% more hit points than shield extenders, but they increase your mass, thus increasing your inertia modifier. So while in an ideal situation it would not affect how much damage you take, it definitely makes your fleet less nimble, which can often cause you to take more damage if you are caught in the wrong moment. The third type of module to consider are shield and armor hardeners. Now at first glance it might seem like adaptive hardeners are better than reactive hardeners, but in most situations reactive hardeners are actually much better because the resistances shaded shift and form to the types of damage you are receiving. The most obvious example of this is in PvE, because the enemies and anomalies always do one primary and one secondary type of damage, so when the reactive hardener distributes the resistances, it is tailored exactly to those types of damage in proportion to the damage being dealt, which will make those resistances always higher than the resistances given by adaptive hardeners, which keep it even across the board. This is also true in many PvP situations, but since adaptive hardeners have more resistance overall, it is usually a better choice for PvP. It is also important to note that reactive shield hardeners offer 25% more resistance percentages than reactive armor hardeners, and adaptive shield hardeners offer 66% more resistance. This is a huge difference and one that should be taken advantage of if you are a shield tank. After that, there are 4 more low slot modules that affect defense, but none of them offer different results for shield or armor tanking. The first one is damage control, which offers small resistances for every damage type on every hit point type, but when activated it increases 9 times the amount of resistance for 13 seconds, instantly making you 4 times as difficult to kill for those 13 seconds. The second one is afterburners, which may not seem like a defensive item, but by increasing your movement speed it significantly decreases the amount of damage your enemy will be able to get on you, because your speed is directly tied to your enemy's ability to track you. Micro warp drives increase your speed way more than afterburners, but they also increase your signature radius, making it to where in most instances you are actually easier to hit. But what it seems like a lot of players don't realize is that it does not always mean that. You have to remember that all of these percentages can be manipulated, so if you maximize the extra speed modifier while decreasing the penalty of your signature radius modifier, you can conceivably manipulate the numbers to make a micro warp drive make you harder to hit. For example, if you are wanting to orbit a nightmare at 5 kilometers in a T9 dead space, the speed boost of your micro warp drive at that distance will offer a bigger benefit than the penalty received by the increased signature radius. And then lastly, the inertia stabilizer doesn't have any direct effect on defense, but it does allow you to turn and accelerate faster, which affects how fast you gain speed, which, as already mentioned, affects your defense. Okay, so now that we've covered all of the low slot enhancements, let's talk about the 4 mid slot enhancements that affect your defense. The first 2 are group shield boosters and group armor repairs, which heal everyone in your fleet around you. These are incredibly powerful modules, allowing an insane amount of healing while using planetary resources as fuel rather than using capacitor. The group armor repairs and shield boosters are essentially the same and offer no variation between the 2 types of tanking. The shield field module is another extremely powerful fuel-based mid-slot item that only a few ships are even allowed to equip. When activated, this module increases the shield resistance of everyone around them by up to 60%, but there is a significant penalty of increasing your signature radius. Similarly, the armor link module is a powerful fuel-based mid-slot item that only a few ships are allowed to equip. When activated, the user shares the damage taken by his nearby allies, making making it extremely difficult to kill anyone in a fleet quickly. In regards to rigs, there is no difference between shield and armor-based defense rigs. Each of them offers faster activation of healing, a greater healing amount, a lower capacitor need for healing, and an increase in hit points, and one for each type of resistance. If you are tanking in a PvE context, the best rigs are usually going to be choosing the resistances specific to the types of damage used by the enemies in the anomalies you are fighting, and sometimes choosing an increased healing amount. If you are tanking in a PvP context, the best rigs are usually increasing your base amount of hit points and possibly choosing a resistance in a category that your ship is naturally weak in. There is also a rig for increasing structure hit points and one for each of the 4 types of resistances, and I'm sure in rare instances these 5 rigs are useful, but as a general rule, structure tanking is a common joke among EVE veterans. In regards to engineering rig slots, increasing your speed with auxiliary thrusters or decreasing your inertia with polycarbon engines will slightly affect your tankiness, and of course increasing your capacitor increases your ability to heal. Well, that's it guys, that is an exhaustive overview of defense in EVE Echoes. If you liked it, make sure to check out some of my other exhaustive overviews or subscribe for more to come. I am also working on making a giant tips and tricks video that covers all of the tips that I have not already covered, so if you would like to help with that, please watch the 4 videos that I've made so far and give me any tips you find that I am missing in those 4 videos. Alright guys, I'll see you next time.